Welcome to class. I'm Trevor, and I post D&D videos every week on Wednesdays. In this video, I'm going to do something that I haven't done yet on this channel, which is do a review. This new book, Candlekeep Mysteries, just released, and I wanted to cover it for this channel. Now, a bit of an overview of the perspective that I have going into this review. So I'm a homebrew DM primarily. I have run, I think, one or two fully published campaigns before. Everything else that I've run has been either modifications of the published material or something that I've come up with completely on my own or found on the internet somewhere else. But this book, I think, offered a really great opportunity for me to review published content from Wizards, but also from the perspective of a homebrew DM. This book, in case you're unaware, is 17 mysteries that are all housed in Candlekeep. Now, Candlekeep is a location in the Forgotten Realms, but one of the things, and it's one of the pros that I have for this book, is you do not need to set this in the Forgotten Realms. These are modular adventures. One of the series that I've been doing on this channel is side quests, and this book works in a similar way. You can run these as one-shots or as drop-in adventures in any campaign. And at the beginning of the book, there's even instructions on how to do that. So Candlekeep can be any library. You can put Candlekeep in your own setting. You can make a different library in your setting, or I would love to do kind of a wizard school style campaign where you could incorporate a lot of these adventures seamlessly. And that to me made me, as soon as I heard that premise for this book, I wanted to get it. Even though I normally run homebrew adventures, this kind of thing seemed like a good middle ground between published content and content that I could slot into a more sandbox or freeform game. And I wasn't just stuck with running exactly what was written in the locale that it was written for. In terms of a pro-con list for Candlekeep Mysteries, I think that the instructions in the beginning of the book are excellent. There's instructions for different places you could use this in, right? Whether it's Candlekeep itself, or they cite Exandria from the Critical Role series, or again, it could be anywhere, but they go out of their way to tell you this does not need to take place in Candlekeep, and I love that. On top of that, again, before the adventures start, they also then go into information about Candlekeep itself. Although that may seem contradictory as a pro, because why would I need Candlekeep if I'm going to put this in my own adventure? I loved that content because it gave me a bunch of ideas for how I could run a magical library of any kind. It doesn't need to just be Candlekeep, right? There's something about the protections within Candlekeep where fire can only be the size of a candle flame, which is really cool, especially because, fire destroys books. And that kind of thinking, that's easy to incorporate, like I said earlier, into a wizard school setting or something like that. So I absolutely love that. I love that the adventures in this book were written by different authors. You get to hear their voice, and you end up getting a lot of different perspectives and genres from the adventures that are published throughout, which is absolutely engaging. It's awesome. And it really makes this feel like scouring through a library and finding all of these different books everywhere, rather than it being kind of the same run-of-the-mill adventure, the same theme throughout from beginning to end. In terms of cons, I don't think there are too many, at least for me personally. There are a lot of people have a complaint in general with 5e that there isn't enough high-level content. And unfortunately, this would have been a great opportunity to include something like that, and they didn't. The adventures top out at level 16, so they could have easily thrown in a level 20 adventure that was in the same vein or used the same framework as the other ones, but they unfortunately didn't do that. And then Nerd Immersion, and I'll link the video in the description, Nerd Immersion posted a criticism that is very valid about how this book does not have an index. And that's frustrating, especially for those of us who are homebrewing based on this book. If you want to pull some of the cool new magic items or monsters out of this book, there's not a convenient way to do it with the printed copy. Now, I don't have the copy from D&D Beyond, so maybe it is a little bit easier on D&D Beyond, but I don't have the printed, I only have the printed copy, so I'm not sure. I think it's worth noting. I don't think it wouldn't put me off of getting the book, but it is a minor criticism. So I'm not going to go through all of the adventures, but I will go through some of them. If there's any interest in me going into a deeper dive on some of these adventures, I'd be happy to. I'll also link videos in the description that do that very thing. There's some great resources. I know Bob the World Builder posted one where he went through almost all, if not all, of the adventures in a lot more depth that I'm going to go into. I wanted this to be a little bit punchier and a little bit quicker in terms of just a review of what I felt from this book. And I might have some other videos coming that kind of build off of this and offer some inspiration that I got from Candlekeep Mysteries as well. The first adventure is Joy of Extra-Dimensional Spaces. And this, I'm so glad they started with this one. This, to me, is exactly what I was thinking of when I thought of finding a book. There's almost this, to borrow like Blue's Clues terminology, there's almost this skidoo element where you're not quite pulled into the book, but the PCs are... The book opens a permanent Mordenkainen's mansion, and then they're trapped in it. And it's a missing persons investigation and a couple of other things. And it's great. It's really well done. It's really engaging. It's an awesome level 1 adventure. I tend to like lower level adventures. I don't know if it's because when I'm running one shots, I'm normally running them for players who are maybe less experienced, and giving them a higher level character is very overwhelming. But I love the first adventure in this book. I highly recommend it. I'm looking forward to running it either for my table or just for friends in general. I don't know, but I think it's really great. The adventure The Price of Beauty is another one that just stuck out to me. It reminds me a lot of the book by Oscar Wilde, Portrait of Dorian Gray. It uses hags and this kind of play off of inner beauty and like bargaining with a hag. And I'm an English teacher. It feels literary inspired, which also gave me some other ideas to work off of. But I absolutely love the way that adventure is kind of crafted, and the allure of like finding a book that can not quite grant you your deepest desires, but maybe something a bit more, maybe some of your more, how do I want to phrase it? Like superficial desires, right? I don't want to look this way. I don't want to weigh this much, whatever it might be. I think that that's really cool. And I love the way that I've always loved running hags as enemies. I think hags are infinitely fun enemies to run. So I like that. The Book of Cylinders, it's less to me about the adventure itself and more about how wild, the book in this are cylinders that you can roll on clay, and they tell a story in the imprint, like the impression. I would never thought of a book that way. Like, that's just fascinating to me. And I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that one because, again, it got the cogs spinning. It was like, this is such a different way to think about what a book is, but that's perfect. Like, books do not need to be literal, like, bound tomes like this. This might be what we think of, but that's limited. It doesn't need to be like this. And then the last one that I want to mention is the Canopic Being. At the beginning of this adventure, the players are kind of hooked because they find this book and they're reading through it, and their names, the PC's names, are listed as willing sacrifices for what ends up being this kind of mummy lord who's trying to... It's fascinating. I liked the plot hook a lot of immediately feeling threatened by the book that you're reading. I could go into more depth on any of these if there's interest in that, but I wanted to, again, to keep this short and sweet. Rather than giving this a grade or a rating, which I don't think is super valuable, I'm just going to say, and I'll do this if I review any of the other books from like published 5th edition material, I'm just going to say, is this worth buying, right? Is it worth spending your money on? And for that, I would say definitively yes. Even for those of you who are more homebrew DMs, I think that this book is the center of the Venn diagram between published content and homebrew material. And I couldn't ask for more from specifically like adventures, right? Obviously, there are other books like Xanathar's and Tasha's that offer different content, but for published adventures, this is exactly what I'm looking for, because I don't need to understand the complete scope of an entire, all I need to have is the hook and then the plot structure and maybe some enemies, and I can slot that in wherever, right? It doesn't need to be in the exact place where they might be thinking. So I really love it. I would recommend buying it. I'll put an Amazon link in the description, and that's really it. That's my review of Candlekeep Mysteries. Like I said, I couldn't recommend it more, especially for those of you who might be kind of dabbling in DMing. Especially the early adventures in this, I think, are pretty user-friendly. And it gives you a lot of options to check out different kind of tones. And I could rave about this for hours. So as always, be safe. Make smart life choices.